Throwing stun.
What is pretty clear to me is that the name of this food is intertwined with some highly culturally contextual preconceived notions about good and evil, which is kind of profound. Now, the etymologists note which is that angel's food cake shows up in the language in the mid to late 19th century, a couple of decades before devil's food. So first we have angel's food cake and then devil's food. Angel's food cake shows up in the flour and
do you hear me, Admiral?
And some other things, and there's your sponge cake. Well, here is an angel's food cake, and this is exactly the same as the sponge cake, except there is no egg yolk. So no egg yolks in this at all. You just take the egg whites, whip them with sugar until you have basically marshmallow fluff, fold in some flour. That is angel food cake. Why did they call it angel food cake? Well, it might not be its texture or its color. Just above the angel food recipe here, there's the recipe for sunshine.
Another tangle identified.
4 egg
Many kinds of human beings out there. One ugly bug KIA.
Because there's a lot of egg whites, but then just 4 egg yolks mixed in with that.
That's Dr. Moline. Joined the physics team last year. Nice enough guy, but weird.
Do be a dear and don't leave a girl hanging. Authorizing chopper gunner close air.
Sunshine cake would have more egg yolks than the angel food cake, but fewer egg yolks than sponge cake. Plenty other historical examples I can point to. Angel food cake, sunshine cake, which suggests that the naming is about the color. Food cakes also assume the tartar as the letter.
Alpha team, exfil window closed.
Sit the hell down, tin can.
That will inhibit browning, which will make the resulting white. sacrifice. And people used to use all kinds of crazy chemical leaveners back in the day. Why would you put ammonia in your cake batter? Well, to raise the pH, to counterbalance the acidifying effect of the cream of tartar and some of the other ingredients, like there's some of these have lemon juice in it. Why would you want to raise the pH? Raising the pH enhances the color. You're going to get you more golden, less pure white. So you want to have a higher pH for the sunshine cake, which is meant to evoke the color of a sunshine, and you want to have a lower pH for the angel's food cake, which is going to have the color of what exactly? Well, quite possibly the clouds in the sky where the angels dwell. So in Abrahamic theology, we think of angels as being these like heavenly servants or agents.
Actually, I might not do it.
Of a benevolent God. And here in the OED, we can see that angel's food, independent of cake, is centuries old as a pair of words, going back here to the 15th century, but always as a metaphor, right? So feeding our souls with the spiritual bread of life, that angel food, that heavenly manna of the Word of God. Scripture is being said or likened to food and calling it angel's food. And manna, the word with which angel's food is a synonym, is this word that pops up in the biblical book of Exodus. It's this food that God theoretically deposited on the ground for the starving Israelites to eat while they were out wandering in the wilderness. And if it's based on anything, one potential real thing it might have been was honeydew, that is to say the sweet secretions of certain insects like aphids. And of course there's examples from all kinds of cultures all over the world of food or drink that people thought was so good that it was fit for a god. So ambrosia, lots of foods have been referred to as ambrosia, which is this ancient Greek word for the food that the ancient Greeks imagined the gods ate up on Mount Olympus, and now we use it to describe this weird mayonnaise fruit salad here in the United States. Angel's food, however, is also used for a fruit salad in South Africa. That's a different evolution of the term. Here, why did they call this cake angel's food starting in the 19th century here in the United States? Well, might have been that they thought that it was just so good that it counted as something that would be good enough for the gods, right? Or what they were looking at was the color, was that they made this very, very pure white cake, and that's a very loaded term here, we'll get back to it, pure white cake. That reminded them of clouds, right? Clouds are theoretically the abode of angels, or they might have considered it to be angelic because the color white is so tied in with concepts of like purity and goodness in white Christian culture. Now here it's important to acknowledge that what we're talking about is not limited to Western European ethnically white culture. The notion that whiteness is associated with life and with cleanliness. These are things that we see across lots of different cultures all over the world and across lots of different cultures with different colored skin tones, right? Because there's sort of semi-universal reasons for it, right? For one thing, humans are diurnal, right? We're awake during the day and then we sleep at night because our visual system is made for the day. at night, when it's dark, when it's black outside, we're more vulnerable because we can't see anything. So that's a reason for us to have evolved to be a little bit scared of dark-colored things. Also, association of whiteness with purity, that kind of makes sense, especially in a world before it was so easy to wash things. If you encountered something that was really, really gleaming white, that was really an indication that it was unusually clean in a world where it was hard to clean stuff. But there's counterexamples across all kinds of other traditional cultures of the world where white represents the unknown and death and things that people are frightened of, whereas black can represent goodness and wealth. And I mean, it gets all scrambled up when you look at the individual culture. It's culturally contextual, and therefore I think we do have to remind ourselves that 19th century United States was a really, really racist place, and that white people definitely had it in their heads that the color white signified purity, in part because it signified pure European lineage, unsullied by the darker-skinned people whom the Europeans had abducted into their country to press into forced labor. So when late 19th century Americans defined devil's food cake in relation to angel's food cake, and that's what the etymologists think happened, we had this thing called angel's food cake. It would be funny to have the opposite of angel's food cake. Oh, maybe it'd be devil's food cake, and it would be the opposite in every conceivable way, color-wise, for sure. Well, we have to consider the possibility that if not explicitly, perhaps implicitly, part of what was going on there is that this is like racist Euro-American cooks baking their racist predispositions into the cake, as it were. Like angel's food, devil's food is a term that existed in English long before it was used to apply to cake. This is a poem from the mid-19th century by Thomas Kibble Hervey called The Devil's Progress, and here we see, the devil slowly from the bank went musing to the mint, and each for tempting men to crime supplied him with a hint that many things at each he found that are a devil's food. Okay, he's comparing devil's food to money. Money is the devil's food. That is to say, a bad thing that the devil tempts you with. I know what that feels like. But devil...
Yeah. I don't have any too closed up. What? Okay. You sober? Oh, that doesn't know.
Devil's food specifically to describe a cake, that shows up, it looks like maybe 10, 20 years after angel's food shows up in the language, right at the end of the 19th century, and didn't necessarily mean any chocolate cake. Like here's a farm journal from 1923, and it's describing angel food cake and gives several recipes for it, and then down here it gives a recipe for chocolate angel food cake. Like it's basically the same thing, except it has a little bit of sifted cocoa in it. There's a whole bunch of chocolate cake and devil's food cake recipes from the late 19th, early 20th centuries that all look basically the same, so here's a really useful source to try to figure out the difference. This is a 1905 cookbook. It's got a recipe for chocolate cake and then some recipes for devil's food cake. Okay. And the difference is just that the devil's food cakes have proportionally more sugar and more butter. They're richer. And here's a somewhat later source. It's from a farmer's bulletin in 1937, and therefore it's further away from the coinage of the term devil's food cake, and so we should trust it a little bit less, but wow, is it on the nose in terms of what we're looking for. Gives a master recipe for a rich cake, that is to say a cake with lots of butter in it, and it says specifically what you need to do to convert it to devil's food. Proportions as for chocolate cake with sour milk instead of sweet, and then 3/8 teaspoon soda, only 2 teaspoons baking powder. Sour milk, aka buttermilk, aka the milk that is left over from churning butter and then fermented to make it a little bit thick. So what this recipe writer is telling us is that what distinguishes regular rich chocolate cake from devil's food cake is buttermilk, sour milk. What does sour milk do to cake? Well, that sourness can actually come through in the taste if you don't balance it with some extra base, as they seem to be suggesting you do by adjusting their leavening in their ingredients. But the main thing that it will do is that it will make the cake kind of thicker and more moist. I think that's a couple of things going on there. One is that the buttermilk itself is thick and therefore adds to the viscosity of the batter. The other thing is that by lowering the pH, what you're doing is you're changing the way that the starches and the proteins also in the wheat will gel. And so you get more of a thick, moist, pudding-like, gel-like texture in the finished cake. It tastes dense and rich and moist if you use buttermilk, and that's what makes it devil's food as opposed to some other kind of chocolate cake. Now that said, you will find recipes online, both historical and modern, for devil's food cake that do not use soured milk. And conversely, you will find recipes for chocolate cake, not necessarily devil's food cake, that do use soured milk. However, the common thread that I have noticed anecdotally runs through all of the recipes for devil's food is that they will be dense and moist, either by use of soured milk or also maybe by use of a solid baking chocolate as opposed to powder or cocoa, right? This, which has actual cocoa fat in it, is going to get you a bit more of a denser, more moist crumb. So all this has led more contemporary people like you and me to speculate that the reason they call it devil's food and they call this angel's food is that this has more calories, right? This has all that fat and sugar, making the crumb more dense and also making it, more likely to make you more dense. Actually less dense, because adipose tissue is comparatively less dense than, say, muscle. Now, I'm a little bit suspicious of that explanation because this notion that calories equal sin, that is a particularly modern, contemporary obsession, right? Back in the day when calories were more scarce, people were less morally hung up about consuming them. On the other hand, we do have a very, very ancient concept of gluttony that pervades, for example, Abrahamic theological thought, right? The idea that taking too much of anything is sinful. That is to say, it's not necessarily because it's like going to make you fat or whatever, but because you're just taking more than your fair share in the community of the thing that there is to eat. Or that specifically inherent in the concept of gluttony is the notion that it is wasteful consumption, right? Something into which there's gone a lot of work, a lot of community resources, and the payback is purely your pleasure as opposed to something more meaningful like your sustenance. So that could be one way in which this got named after the devil while this got named after the angel. Or, it could just be racism. But there's also this centuries-old word in English, deviled. Deviled as in deviled eggs, deviled all kinds of food. Generally refers to highly flavored or spiced foods. And one potential etymology there is that maybe people just associated intensely flavored foods with the pleasures of the body, and therefore something that appealed to your more animal instincts, your less civilized instincts. Ooh, dangerous, right? But what the OED looks at for the etymology of deviled is this Hellenistic Greek word describing sort of demonic possession. So in that sense, deviled food may actually just be food that has the spirit inside it, right? The wheat or whatever the main nutrition providing ingredient in there, that's the vessel, right? But the spirit that's inside of it is the tastiness, the seasoning that you put in there. In the case of this cake, it's the chocolate. But we have no way of knowing if devil's food cake was named after other deviled foods. Just looking at the evidence as I have, I suppose I'm leaning personally more toward the explanation that it was simply defined in opposition to a pre-existing food, which was the angel cake. And while color may be the most obvious difference between these two, I want us to consider texture as well. All of the things that make angel food cake different from other kinds of sponge cakes, you know, leaving out the egg yolks, not using butter, that kind of stuff, not only do they affect color, they also affect texture. If you put some egg yolks in here to make it a sunrise cake or whatever they were calling it before, not only would that make this look a little bit yellow, it would also make the resulting cake denser, heavier, right? And what do light things do? They float. They're more buoyant, right? They float up into the air like a nice light puffy cloud, whereas heavy things get dragged down, down, down to the core by their weight. And especially within the context of like Abrahamic religions, where we associate heavenly things with up high and hellish things with down low, well, that seems like another reason to associate a dense cake with the devil and a light cake with the opposite of the devil. Of course, in my belief system, there's nothing remotely sinful or devilish about chocolate cake. In fact, I would consider devil's food to be manna from heaven, much like Squarespace, sponsor of this video. You're gonna see how easy it is to make a website from scratch now using Squarespace's design intelligence. Devil cake. I want my brand personality to be playful. Gonna need an intro, a product section, and about at the very least. Choose a color palette. That looks like it could be chocolatey. It's a chocolatey font, I'll tell you that. And then it just builds the whole thing for you. Anything they put in that I need to change, I just double click on it and edit, replace that photo. But of course you can use stock art. They've got a huge stock photo library you can use. Type in my own text, ain't no sin about it. That's right. Now if I want to sell people my cakes over the internet, I can just add a commerce block here and we'll do Squarespace payments. Whether you're taking like ACH debit or Apple Pay, Afterpay, ClearPay in the UK, it's all here. And of course, whether it's mobile or desktop, you can just grab the elements and move them around on the grid using Fluid Engine. You can do all of that for free right now at squarespace.com. But when it's time to pay for something, like publishing your site and making it live and having Squarespace host it for you, or when it comes to registering a custom domain, think of your old buddy Goose. Use my code Ragusia at checkout, or you can just go to squarespace.com/Ragusia. Save 10% on publishing your first website or registering a domain name. Thank you, Squarespace. And thank you, cake. I love both of these kinds of cake, even if their naming history may be at least somewhat on some subconscious level intertwined with
doing belt the squats by accident. Wait for it.
So even though research has shown a weightlifting belt can help you lift heavier weights with more explosive power, there's still 2 rules that you should follow when using one. Rule number 1, you don't wear your weightlifting belt for every single set, especially your warm-ups. This is Lee Sang, a South Korean weightlifter going through some deadlifts. You'll notice he's not going to put his weightlifting belt on until his heaviest sets. Let me tell you the reason for that in a second. Rule number 2, you still have some programmed heavy lifts within your training without a belt, like this no belt pause squat that Lee's performing here. Excellent technique. You see, even though a weightlifting belt can be helpful at increasing intra-abdominal cavity pressure and therefore stability, we never want to lose sight of enhancing our natural weightlifting belt. And if you do this correctly, you may just surprise yourself one day with how well your lifts will feel without a belt too.
Doing belt the squats by accident.
Hey, welcome in, ladies.
Oh, you're all alone this time.
He's all grown up. Yeah, training's over. I'm a swing server now.
Swing server? Oh, we know all about that.
Yeah, we swing. And how's my favorite couple doing tonight? Favorite? You trying to butter me up?
Oh, speaking of butter, while you're here, can you get us some more bread and butter?
You know I can. And how was dinner?
Oh, good as ever.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. Now listen, in the spirit of the season, I want to pick up your check tonight. Just a little thank you for being such faithful regulars.
Are you serious?
The whole bill? Sure thing. It's just a little Christmas present we're doing for our regulars. Meaning I ain't even got to use a gift card or nothing. Save it. Merry Christmas. Just take care of your server, you know?
Well, I just don't know what to say.
That's mighty kind of you. I thank you. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Brad? Yeah. You Change your mind about dessert? Give me another ribeye to go, and I'll take another one of these Whistle Pig balls.
And another glass of Kendall Jackson Chardonnay.
Give 'em 2 of 'em.
And if you could just bring out one of each dessert so we can just try them all.
Good thing.
Yeah, and you might as well give me another Santa Fe chicken to go to for tomorrow.
There you go.
Wow, are we celebrating or something?
Guess we're just feeling the Christmas spirit.
'Tis the season.
So Trick Terry came by and said he was picking up our tab.
That's cool.
Yeah, he said just to take care of our server. So what do you want, cash, grass, or ass?
What the hell, Tim?
Oh, they're long gone. They said you were paying for it.
For their dinner, not their damn groceries for the week.
They said you'd handle my tip, too.
Damn it!
If I tell you
the slim new Nokia phone with voice dialing fits
Rapid
the way
Response
you
Team
live.
Alpha, Security Chief Blanchard.
Connecting.
I'll copy.
Now, when covering topics like
Barricaded the command
poverty and
center.
extreme poverty,
Not a little
I want to
dinged
make
up.
sure that it's
I'll
treated
live.
with dignity and respect.
See if there's
Because at
anyone
the end
left
of
to
the day,
say.
we're all
Body
humans.
cam's live.
The
I'll
idea
keep eyes
of
on it.
eradicating poverty is one that's always been there. At no point in this episode do I want to come across as reductionist. There are monumental challenges when it comes to solving global poverty. And what I'm going to talk about isn't poverty in a very meaningful way. So that's why I'm bringing this method to light. Hi, welcome to another episode of Cold Fusion. Imagine being in a position where your children can't even afford to eat more than one meal per day. Your child is so hungry.
My bad. That was supposed to be one across the bows.
Blanchard to Alpha. 3 Janus science staffers are missing somewhere in your AO.
To stay awake, let alone
Locate and
focus.
extract.
Eventually,
Counting
they
on
have to
their
drop out of
expertise
school.
to end this
You
outbreak.
do what you can for your family in order to get by. But sadly, escaping poverty was a pipe dream. But just when things seem hopeless, one day, suddenly, your family is pulled out of poverty. And it's not just your family, but the whole village. Subsequent to the sudden change of fortune comes countless stories, from people being able to pay for cancer treatments, to buying clothes, food, starting families. Now you might think, that's all right. What's so significant about that? Here's the catch. The mechanism used to lift these people out of poverty was a feature phone, otherwise known as a dumb phone, exactly like the old school Nokias from 20 years ago. So what if the humble feature phone and a basic cell network is all that's needed to lift people out of poverty? Imagine just being able to text someone
For a
money
team who
or
didn't
pay for
expect to
something
take on the
without even
apocalypse
having to
today.
use the internet.
You're handling this
How
well.
on earth is that possible? In this episode, we'll see how simple technological tools are transforming lives in ways that we may not have thought of before. We'll also cover some economics and look at some research on the best ways to help people. It turns out that the ways which we often think will help aren't the most effective. This episode was made in collaboration with Future, an organization that uses simple yet effective innovation to help those less fortunate. I chose to work with them because of their organizational transparency, the vast amounts of research that they've done, and proof of their successful outcomes. And other educational channels now are doing our part to help. You can learn more later in the episode. Let's get into it.
You are watching Cold Fusion TV.
Technology today is the lifeblood of modern society. Without the internet, computers, and the software we use every day, where would we be? We all take for granted the economic productivity that it gives us. But what about the faraway corners of the world? The places where people can barely afford to eat? We generally think about using technology to help the poorest in the world. But it's not that straightforward because, in a lot of regions, even using the internet regularly is out of the question. Now, there's a lot of talk in the media about 1 billion people coming online in the next 5 years. But the reality is, in some cases, 1 gigabyte of data is 8% of the world's weight. For some of us, this is unthinkable because we take the internet as just a part of life. So, if we wanted to help people, the very poorest among us in the most rural of areas, how would it be done? Well, first, let's take a look at how people in the poorest regions of the world live. In some places in the world, entire communities are extremely poor, not by any fault of their own. It's just that getting ahead is next to impossible without capital or the infrastructure that provides them with opportunities. The fact of the matter is, if you're born into poverty, it's very hard to escape. We hear stats all the time, like 8% of the world live in extreme poverty. But what does that mean?
That must have been Dennis
According to
Griffin.
the World Bank,
Church groundskeeper. Good guy.
on the 700 million people,
Luck didn't stick around the airport.
that means to live on less than $2.15 US per day.
Bravo Zulu.
And in
One
some
less
places,
Ghost Fighter to
that
worry
number
about.
is under $1 per day. There's no getting around it. If you're born into conditions like that, it's very, very hard to escape. A lot of us may look at this and feel the urge to help on an individual level. After all, it doesn't cost much to lift someone in public if they're used to $2 per day. Where do you even begin? How do you get money to them effectively? Of course, you could hand out cash, but I don't have to explain why carrying cash around is dangerous. Plus, in rural areas, there may simply be no banks to store it. We could look at another way, try a crypto solution, where everyone has a mobile wallet. It's a forward-thinking idea, but it's not practical, given that access to the internet and even smartphones could be few and far between. While a payment network of some kind is a solution to bypass banks and avoid being a target for carrying cash, the only problem is it doesn't fit in with the reality on the ground. In the poorest areas of the world, $80 for a smartphone is a lot of money. That cost could be 2 months of saving every cent that you earn.
Quite the high caliber
As mentioned in
makeover.
some countries. Aside from expense, smartphones are easier to break and could be stolen when everyone else around you is also desperate. This isn't to mention that digital literacy could be very low, especially in sometimes this isn't even unique to the regions being discussed here. Even if crypto could be implemented somehow, how could local vendors be able to be convinced to accept it? So this does pose an interesting question. How exactly do you build out a payment network under such stringent conditions? This is where the humble feature phone comes into the picture. We all remember the original Nokias, where just about the most advanced thing you could do is play a game of Snake or Space Invaders. In a world of smartphones that can do everything, even fold in half, how does such an antiquated device provide a solution? Interestingly, one of the solutions to this problem comes out the nation invented the first ever financial service where people could exchange money from the SIM cards of feature phones for a text message. This happened 20 years ago, before anyone had implemented the concept in the West. The service, called mobile money, or M-Pesa in Swahili, emerged as a solution, functioning like a bank account without needing physical banks. It gained traction in developing countries through text-based services. It all started in 2002 when phone companies noticed something interesting. Users started trading phone credits like currency. Safari became the subsidiary of Vodafone, saw this, and developed a text-based money system distributed by vendors that sold phone credits. Initially using online repayments, users found diverse applications such as safes, money transfers, a vehicle and mechanism.
Yeah, that's right. This is a story bed.
Payment and savings accounts. It served as a powerful substitute for inaccessible financial services. The growth was rapid. By 2009, it had over 8 million subscribers in Kenya, reaching 50 million by 2012. It now operates in many regions of Africa and is now in Asia. Today, 1.6 billion people have access to mobile money banking. Mobile money has revolutionized financial systems, going global, often as cash-only system. Continues to be today, but unlike mobile money so how do you physically pay for this? There's no NFC chip.
See that one head pop off? Don't let it escape.
You could buy a goat, groceries, or anything else on mobile money. And I think overall it's a cool solution. Not only is it simple, but it's cheap. And it's a great example of using technology effectively in an extremely constrained environment. Now, since the early 2000s, Kenya itself has evolved greatly in terms of internet connectivity, entrepreneurship,
Best
and the country
day ever.
Only Silicon Valley exists. There's a lot of there are still those rural areas within Kenya and other African countries that have been left behind. What about them? A New York-based organization called Give Directly decided to build on it by using door-to-door surveys, government data, AI, and machine learning incentives. They're able to identify the villages that need the money the most, enroll them in mobile money, and send them cash, usually around $1,000 per household. That's what they might be surviving on in a year, given to them all at once. Now this might set off some alarm bells for some people, but the research says that this works well. And we'll get to that in a later part of the episode.
So we've been helped by a revolution in technology in Africa, which is mobile money. And many, many Africans now are able to receive money directly on their phones. That allows us to transfer directly from someone in the United States.
Told you I'm a crack shot.
And the results are revolutionary. It is extraordinary. Whether it be a small amount or you are
Needs must when the devil drives.
in Africa, you see the most wonderful things on education, on housing, on people getting rights, amazing improvements in education enrollment.
But what we've seen with cash transfers is that you're transferring cash directly to the people who need it most, and you're transferring the agency for people like me working with the government to the recipients themselves, and they can define for themselves the pathways out of poverty. So I think that's what makes cash transfers very different and Give Directly different as well.
But let's continue with the story. In all of these cases, how do users get their cash after transferring money? Well, this is the crazy part. The system uses human ATMs in a small booth. I guess in regions like this, low tech is the best tech. Human agents are deployed in locations across the country for deposits and withdrawals, enabling cashless transactions even in the most remote areas. There's a digital ledger of what's happening, so the agents aren't going to do anything dodgy without being fired. This text-based system significantly impacts poor families.
Makes me want to run away from my own taste buds.
Mobile money access 192,000 Kenyans from a It allowed for savings and easy cash.
How it's done.
Max ammo.
transfers between family members, creating a financial safety net. And this is even without any cash injections, just the power of the network alone. So how does this look in practice? Imagine if you live in rural Kenya and you need some supplies for your shop, some rice for example. Instead of getting some cash, venturing out to find a seller, and bringing the rice to your shop, with mobile money, all you have to do is whip out your feature phone, call the supplier, send him some money via text message, and he'll bring you the rice. Interestingly, money transfers coming from family members outside of Africa to family members in Africa, more than all African aid combined. A growing part of it is mobile money transfers.
I think you might know that in terms of like to this part of the world, it's about $50 billion USD. And this is money to fund
You must be so proud of the minor success you are experiencing.
I think this came at a really good time for the world people to rise and display both in terms of access to mobile phones, but also access to mobile money transfer service to be able to do cash transfers at scale.
My expectations were low, and yet you have met them.
All of the global.
My programming dictates I inform you that the highest trial tier reward has been unlocked. I never doubted your commitment. Other things, yes, but not your commitment.
In 2021, during the COVID lockdown, Togo's government partnered with Give Directly and other organizations. They were going to launch an innovative direct payment system. They analyzed satellite imagery of urban layouts and housing materials, plus mobile phone data patterns, to target aid to the most impoverished communities and individuals. Researchers used algorithms to identify the 200 poorest cantons.
You might need to rethink which is your best side.
Just minutes. Mobile aid won both a Paris Peace Forum Award and the 2022 South by Southwest Innovation Award. The program in Togo is so successful that the system should be widely adopted. The system combines machine learning with in-person phone would be supplied to them, and in areas without phone network, Give Directly would help build new towers. Once this was all done, the SMS payment would be integrated. The recipients get their mobile money transfers and can spend their money on what they need most, like school fees, new homes, farmland, livestock, or starting a business. During emergencies like famines or floods, mobile aid can quickly screen populations and identify those most in need. What I find interesting about this method is that it basically cuts out all bureaucracy. Another interesting example was in Nigeria. There's a village called Ogba Ojibo. Unfortunately, the village floods every year. There's a lot of fishermen and farmers whose livelihoods are affected. General aid doesn't solve the problem. In 2024,
that's Dr. Moline.
Here's how it works in
Joined the physics team last year.
When the flood season
Nice
begins,
enough guy,
Give
but
Directly
weird.
uses data from an AI prediction model from Google to identify flood pressure. When the water rises above a critical threshold, a trigger is activated, and from there,
Extra
payments
window
can be
missed.
sent out.
We'll advise when
Those
it reopens.
affected take the opportunity to stock up on food and other essentials while they can. So what about fraud? Well, there's an audit team to track transfers, and a PIN number and complimentary phone call to check that who's receiving the money is the correct person. It's not perfect, as fraud still happens. According to Give Directly, losses from fraud are estimated to be just under 1% annually, and the fraud happens through bribes, SIM swapping, and imposter. 1% is about 150,000 of the 150 million given out. That is lower than other forms of aid, which lose about 5% per year. But unlike other forms of aid, mobile money can be monitored and tracked, similar to credit card companies. But despite that, the benefits of the system are very
Kabla Give Direct haijafika huku kwetu, mimi nilikuwa sina nyumba ambayo naweza jistiri vizuri pale ndani ya nyumba. Manake kwenye mimi nilikuwa nalala, kukinyesha maji yanaingia. Tulipewa 1,10,000, nusu yake zile za kwanza ndo nilitumia nikajenga nyumba, nusu nyingine nikachukua nikatumia kwa chakula.
Upande wa kilimo zangu kwa lakini nilipata kurudisho katika kusumbua sana.
lakini hivi ilipokuwa imefika na ukianza kilimo, nikawa nimepata nafasi ya kuweza kununua zile pembejeo za kulima, hasa madawa. Nikanunua hii booster uweza control wild pests, na hapo nilipata gunia 35.
Changamoto ilikuwa ni njia ya kupatia pesa. Naweza kosa pesa ya kununua unga, naweza kosa pesa ya kulipia watoto shule. Ile pesa ilinisaidia na nikakaa nikafikiria nikikula tu chakula itaisha, alafu tarudi yale maisha pale nyuma. Ndio nikafikiria nianzishe biashara ya kufungua mitumba.
The cool thing is that you can help in the next effort through Give Directly by donating at this link, givedirectly.org/coldfusion, but I'll tell you more about it later in the episode. Now let's get onto the economics. Surely, just giving people cash and letting them do whatever they want is going to end in disaster, is it not? So you'd think that giving people stuff or skills to help themselves would be the best way to help them. But this isn't actually the case. It turns out sounds crazy. As we've all heard the saying, give a man a fish and he can eat for a day. Teach a man to fish and he can eat for a day.
Never been a fan of these. Too indiscriminate.
Can indeed eat for life.
To be fair, the Russian agents I hunt aren't usually that obvious.
Don't actually help people.
Oh God, their nails look
to about
filthy.
0.3%. Actually, the most common way to get out of poverty is via doing it themselves. That is, by finding a job, starting a business.
Call me old-fashioned, but I prefer my fizzy drinks
The rate of these factors helping someone leave poverty is over 75%. Giving cash directly helps to this end.
This is why you never leave your weapon unattended.
Or even something that I've ever heard of. But it makes sense when you think about it.
We are not having the confidence of giving cash to people. Most African communities know much better than a foreign worker what their real needs are. You imagine yourself in a very poor community. Every house has a different need. One person might need to get their kids back to school. Their neighbor might need to fix their roof. Somebody else might need to put some food on the table. And giving cash to people is the most efficient and effective way of delivering support. And it gives them dignity, gives them choice, lets them be in charge of the decisions in their own lives.
In Kenya, a lump sum injection of $500 resulted in a 65% revenue increase in village businesses, 20% more businesses, 141% increase in annual income from self-employment, a decrease in depression, 14% better primary school outcomes, and a 4% decrease in alcohol consumption.
All the range time is paying off at least.
2 years after the original. In a village in Rwanda, similar positive outcomes were seen with the cash injection. An interesting side effect was that those within the community would keep tabs on each other and keep each other accountable on how they spent the money.
This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Don't waste it. And that's how most of the communities think about, the investments that Give Directly places in their hands. And I think to some extent there's also like community peer pressure to be like, you got your investment, what did you do with it? All your neighbors are also getting the same investment, so you can see them buying. So what I'm saying is that school attendance going up, we're seeing gender.
Park requesting Hellstorm strike.
I think but very encouraging to see really positive effects on child mortality. Generally, the communities are healthier, happier. I think that's something that has also been interesting to see.
This all makes perfect sense, even if it's somehow a little unintuitive. How do we know that these numbers are statistically and scientifically sound? Well, in 2009, 3 economists, Abhijit Banerjee, Esther Duflo, and Michael Creamer won a Nobel Prize for finding out a method to carry out randomized controlled trials and field experiments on poverty relief. It turned around the notion that giving physical things or teaching skills was the best way to help people. What the results show is that this isn't necessarily the best way to help people.
Is not that place.
It turns out the wrong way this whole time.
Shooting stop.
I have added a note to your file to say you don't suck.
And let the head teacher buy those buttons. The answer was, we were worried that if we my response was, we told them we could have done
You are a motivated description not found. Medium trial reward unlocked.
I went through and I saw a project where an NGO had turned out the ground, and instead of doing massive development so teaching them how to fish, they were turning out to village houses and saying, here is $900 from you. This is your money, you can do with it whatever.
Enjoy your time. May this bring you not joy, increased odds of survival.
With a fantastic increase in the number of children in school, the whole place just felt better, happier. Honestly, in my entire life in international development, I'd never seen anything like this village.
Abhijit Banerjee, one of the researchers, comments, quote, "It's striking how little evidence there is that when you give people an unexpected bunch of cash, they go out and buy booze or something else bad for them. It's clear that cash is really extraordinarily overemphasized. They seem to spend it on perfectly sensible. I'm concerned about inflation though. But so far, the studies conducted show that free money doesn't cause inflation in lower income countries. In 2014, the non-profit Give Directly and research partners carried out a large study. The aim was to see how a large lump sum of payments of $1,000 could help rural communities in Kenya. 653 randomized villages were chosen. 10,500 poor households were selected. This amounted to 15% of the local GDP, a relatively huge amount. But wait a second. Doesn't giving money to people just push up the demand for goods and services, contributing to price inflation? Well, not so fast, because after 2.5 years, researchers found that the average price inflation was just 0.1%. So MMT and UBI advocates would be rejoicing. But the fact of the matter is that a blanket UBI may not always work. Contrast to the work with pandemic. The Federal Reserve themselves admit that COVID stimulus contributed to inflation in multiple countries. The reasons for why this happened are complex, but at the end of the day, inflation as a consequence depends on where the cash is given out, how exactly the cash is given out, and how much slack there is in the local economy. Even though it's better than blowing money on traditional charity, Give Directly still looks for inflationary risks where they're scaling up. But according to the study, the multiplier effect, every dollar of cash income, $2.50 was generated in the form of spending.
Sending energy mine.
Both funds didn't represent. In the last decade, there's been a growing body of evidence to suggest that cash improves the lives of the local miners, more than if that same money was given in the form of traditional aid programs or goods. If their small local businesses could receive money in a frictionless way, so in conclusion, for many multiple decades, there's been various efforts of charity, novel technologies, and aid from the West to the poorer nations of the world. Ideas that come to mind is one laptop per child, the socket ball, or the play pump. These all failed to make a lasting change. And it's ironic because what turned out to be one of the most effective solutions was an innovation from Africa itself, mobile money. We often forget a life without comfort, the internet, or leisure, a life just about surviving. Some novel technology or a cryptocurrency isn't going to work, but with just a basic phone and some well-designed financial targeting of the past for so many. To wrap things off, a group of educational creators and I are getting together to raise some funds. If you want to donate to a village in need and ensure your money goes to them in the best and most efficient way possible, you can visit the URL givedirectly.org/coldfusion. Your donations will be distributed via mobile money in a village in central Kenya. Each family will receive $850. It's an opportunity